This is my 6-month plan for completing my final PhD report in 6 months. So I was in January of 2019, and I felt that I could stretch myself to complete everything within 6 months to submit to the examiners. So I had to work out how I got from the beginning of January to the middle of the year or the end of July, and then fill in all the different phases of work that I needed to do to achieve that goal. And of course, as I explained in the course, very importantly, obviously, that in those final stages of your PhD and masters, possibly, you will need to work with your supervisors, and they will need to commit to goals on their side as well. So I had quite a few of my sections at fairly advanced stages by then, and in the course I explained to you the importance of writing early, and we go through that in some more detail. But I'm going to take you through now the steps I took to put this plan in place, so that you can do the same for yourself and use planning to be a technique to help you be successful as a student and to complete your degree. So the first thing I did was to look at the 6 months in blocks of weeks and give myself a certain number of weeks for each of the sections of my final report. So you can see here, for example, introduction, I felt that I could polish that off in a week, and recognizing that this wasn't going to be an average 6 months in my life. This was going to be an incredibly intense period when I really focused on getting my PhD completed. So it was working nights, weekends, early mornings. Obviously, I was part-time. I still had a demanding day job. Then I knew I had a bit more work to do on the literature review, so that I gave myself 2 weeks. And then my methodology section, I also gave 2 weeks. Then the big outstanding section for me was results. And as I explained in the course, introduction, literature review, and methods to some degree, if you've done a good proposal, there's a lot in there that you can reuse and bring forward, and obviously your study will have changed direction slightly, and you need to accurately reflect that. None of these are copy-paste from your proposal. You need to make sure that they accurately reflect the final product of your degree. But if you've done them properly and you've created paragraphs, sentences, and building blocks of your writing that can be moved around, then it is possible to reuse a lot of that, to reformat it, lay it out slightly differently, and just make sure that it's a dramatic improvement on your proposal, of course. So results, I gave myself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to complete. And then discussion and conclusion, I gave myself 2 weeks. And one can quickly see that you're moving through the months quite quickly. And at the beginning of April, I then gave myself a week to pull everything together, because sections are individual pieces of writing, but they need to be integrated with each other. So you need to have some sort of flow from one to the next, and you need to think about how you finish one section in a way that adequately summarizes it and helps the reader move from the end of that section to the beginning of the next section. A very important principle that I teach in the course, and there's an entire lesson on it, is the weekly status report, which I go into in some detail. And for me, I would send a weekly status update every Sunday night, which I had been doing all the way through from the beginning of my study. And so I made sure that these blocks of work for each of these sections would finish on that Sunday night, and I would then have that section ready to add to that weekly report. And once my supervisor obviously seen this whole plan, they would then be expecting to see those sections coming through to them. But I had explained to them I didn't expect them to review and comment on it. That was then a total 6 weeks, 6-week block of time that I allocated to them. They would have seen the sections as I'd finished them, but again, that was in isolation and not as a fully integrated draft version of my final report. after the contingency week at the middle of April, I then committed to send them through the whole thing, and we agreed that they would then take 6 weeks to give me a first round of comments and feedback on the document. Then and also remember that having had an intense 3 months or so up here, when that supervisor review period would come along, that would be a bit of a break for me, and I would step away from my studies, just refresh. We went away as a family for holiday, and I obviously coincided that in with the supervisor review as well. And one's got to think about what's happening in your family life and make sure that it synchronizes. So we had a family holiday booked for that third week of April. So it also gave me an additional motivation to make sure that I got my report into my supervisors before we went away. And I knew that going away, having handed that draft final report in, would be a great milestone for me. And then the work sat really with my supervisors to go through it and to give me feedback. Then, as I say, having received quite a lot of corrections back from them, I then gave myself 5 weeks to do a first round of corrections based on that feedback. I then added in a second round of supervisor review and corrections, and partly the reason for this was that I had 3 supervisors, so it was quite possible that I would get a different set of corrections from each one, and they may be consistent, they may not be consistent. I'd have to merge them and merge those changes into my document, get them back, and hopefully wouldn't need more than another 2 weeks for them to go through that overall final document. Gave myself then another final week to do those corrections, and then 1 week of contingency over here, and then obviously, as I said, the goal was to submit here at the end of July. So that was the plan, and it did work out reasonably well. And because my supervisors had committed to it, they were quite ready for when they had that document arrive in their email, and they pretty much stuck to the 6 weeks, and I pretty much stuck to my 5 weeks for corrections, and it worked reasonably well. We did slip a little bit, if I recall correctly. We submitted in August, and remember that when you submit to your external examiners, the way it worked in my university is that those 3 examiners, one is from the university, one is local in South Africa, and one is international and recognized expert in the field. And really submitting to those external examiners is a collective milestone with your supervisors. They have to commit or they have to make sure that it is of a sufficient quality to put in front of those examiners. So it's really a collective outcome. But with a comprehensive overall 6-month plan, roughly speaking, which we all then agreed to and all knew exactly what we needed to do and when we needed to do it, and well in advance of those deadlines. As I explain in my course, I printed this out, I put it on my cupboard, and I saw it every morning, and I would then mark off each day as I went through, and I could see the progress that I was making, and I could see the countdown. It was no longer a weekly drumbeat that was there for my supervisors, obviously through the status report, but for me it started to become a weekly countdown through those 6 months to make sure that I completed all of those phases and all of those sections of the final report, put it together, and then get 2 cycles of reviews and comments back from my supervisor. And I can honestly say that this was one of the most important things that I did in my study, particularly at the most intense period, which will be for you when you have to pull everything together and put it into a final report. And planning like this and applying good discipline planning to big projects, such as doing a PhD, will be highly beneficial to you and provide a greater degree of certainty that you will finish your degree.